Bond with. To form a chemical bond between atoms or molecules. Synonym for. Bond with. Form a bond with, attach to, connect with, link with, affix to, join with. Carbon atoms can bond with hydrogen atoms to form hydrocarbons. Metals often bond with nonmetals to form ionic compounds. Hydrogen atoms bond with oxygen atoms to form water molecules. Decompose into. To break down into simpler substances through chemical reactions. Synonym for. Decompose into. Break down into, disintegrate into, degrade into, fragment into, dissolve into, collapse into. Organic matter decomposes into simpler compounds like carbon dioxide and water during composting. Hydrogen peroxide decomposes into water and oxygen when exposed to light. When heated, calcium carbonate decomposes into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Ionize into. To convert atoms or molecules into ions by gaining or losing electrons. Synonym for. Ionize into. Convert into ions, electrify, charge, polarize, magnetize, energize. In the experiment, the high-energy particles cause the gas molecules to ionize into charged particles, altering the chemical composition of the substance. As the radiation passed through the material, it caused the atoms to ionize into positively and negatively charged ions, fundamentally changing the material's properties. When subjected to extreme heat, atoms of certain elements ionize into positively charged ions. Fuse together. To combine two or more substances into a single entity through high temperature or pressure. Synonym for. Fuse together. Merge, blend, unite, weld, meld, integrate. Under extreme pressure, hydrogen nuclei fuse together to form helium in the core of stars. Welding involves fusing together two pieces of metal to create a strong bond. Two hydrogen atoms fuse together to form a helium atom in nuclear fusion reactions. Neutralize out. To cancel the effects of an acid or base by adding a substance of opposite pH. Synonym for. Neutralize out. Counteract, offset, nullify, cancel out, balance, compensate. A few drops of vinegar can neutralize out the excess baking soda in a recipe. The acidic soil was neutralized out by adding agricultural lime to raise the pH. Adding a base can neutralize out the acidic properties of a solution. React out. To undergo a chemical reaction and form products. Synonym for. React out. Undergo a reaction, respond, engage, interact, counteract, counter. When methane and oxygen react out, they form carbon dioxide and water. Heating magnesium metal and oxygen causes it to react out and form magnesium oxide. When sulfuric acid reacts out with sodium hydroxide, water and sodium sulfate are formed. Hydrolyze into. To break down a compound into its constituents by reacting with water. Synonym for. Hydrolyze into. Decompose into, dissociate into, break up into, split into, disintegrate into, separate into. During digestion, enzymes hydrolyze complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. Soap molecules hydrolyze into fatty acids and glycerol when exposed to water. Ester molecules hydrolyze into carboxylic acid and alcohol in the presence of water and acid. Measure up. To compare oneself or something to a standard or expectation. Synonym for measure up. Compare, meet the standard, fulfill expectations, qualify, satisfy, conform. She hoped her performance would measure up to the standards of the previous year. The new product must measure up to industry standards before it can be released. He was worried if he would measure up to the expectations of his new job. Set side by side. To compare two or more things directly by placing them next to each other. Synonym for set side by side. Compare, contrast, juxtapose, place together, parallel, associate. Let's set the different models side by side so we can compare their features. The teacher set the two essays side by side to compare their structure and content. The teacher set two essays side by side to compare the students' writing styles. Lay side by side. Similar to set side by side, to compare or contrast by placing things next to each other. Synonym for lay side by side. Compare, contrast, juxtapose, place together, parallel, associate. He laid the two proposals side by side to analyze their differences. Can you lay the fabric samples side by side so we can see how they look together? The two paintings were laid side by side for comparison during the art exhibition. Hold up against. To compare something to a standard or expectation to see if it remains acceptable or valid. Synonym for hold up against. Compare, contrast, evaluate, assess, judge, gauge. We'll see if this theory holds up against experimental data. The new software will need to hold up against rigorous testing before it's released to the public. The new product design will be held up against customer feedback to assess its effectiveness. Match up against. To compare two or more things to see if they are equal or comparable. Synonym for match up against. Compare, contrast, assess, evaluate, weigh, judge. Let's match your skills against the job requirements to see if you're the right fit for the position. In the upcoming debate, the seasoned politician will match up against the newcomer, providing an interesting clash of experience and fresh perspectives. The young athlete was excited to match up against his childhood idol in the championship game, eager to test his skills against the best in the sport. Draw a comparison between. To compare or contrast two things by pointing out similarities or differences. Synonym for draw a comparison between. Compare, contrast, analogize, parallel, relate, equate. Let's draw a comparison between the traditional approach and the new methodology to determine which one yields better results. When you draw a comparison between the two products, you'll notice significant differences in their features. The speaker drew a comparison between traditional teaching methods and modern educational approaches. Set against. To compare or contrast two things by highlighting differences or opposing qualities. Synonym 4. Set against. Compare, contrast, oppose, align, place in opposition, counterpose. The two political candidates are set against each other due to their opposing views on healthcare reform. The protagonist's character traits are set against those of the antagonist to create conflict in the story. The contrasting themes in the novels are deliberately set against each other to highlight societal issues. Weigh against. To consider the relative importance or value of something when compared to another. Synonym 4. Weigh against. Compare, contrast, assess, evaluate, judge, gauge. The benefits of the new policy will be weighed against its potential drawbacks. Before making a decision, the committee needed to weigh the costs against the potential benefits to ensure they were making the best choice for the organization. To find the most suitable candidate, the hiring team had to weigh each applicant's qualifications against the job requirements and company culture. Square off against. To compare or contrast two things, especially when they are in opposition or competition. Synonym 4. Square off against. Compare, contrast, face, confront, compete, measure up to. The two teams will square off against each other in the championship match next week. The debate will see the two scholars square off against each other on the topic of artificial intelligence. In the debate, the candidates will square off against each other on various issues. Stand side by side. To compare or contrast two or more things by placing them together for examination. Synonym 4. Stand side by side. Compare, contrast, juxtapose, place together, parallel, associate. Standing side by side, the two paintings reveal striking similarities in their use of color and composition. Let's put the two reports side by side to compare their findings and recommendations. The charts stand side by side, allowing viewers to compare the data easily. Match against. To compare one thing to another to see if they are similar or compatible. Synonym 4. Match against. Compare, contrast, pit against, confront, measure against, compete with. The company's performance will be matched against industry benchmarks to assess its competitiveness. In the final round of the tournament, the underdog team was matched against the reigning champions, setting the stage for an intense battle for the title. Line up against. To compare or contrast one thing with another by placing them in opposition. Synonym 4. Line up against. Compare, contrast, oppose, face, confront, compete with. Let's line up the candidates' qualifications against the job description to assess their suitability. The opposition parties decided to line up against the proposed legislation, citing concerns about its potential impact on civil liberties. The players in the league quickly lined up against the controversial decision made by the commissioner, expressing their dissatisfaction with the new regulation. Stack up against. To compare or evaluate something in relation to a standard or expectation. Synonym 4. Stack up against. Compare, contrast, measure up to, match, equal, stand up to. As the new employee's performance was evaluated, the team leader wanted to see how he would stack up against more experienced colleagues. The quality of the product will be stacked up against competitors in the market. How does our company stack up against our competitors in terms of customer satisfaction? Pair off against. To compare or contrast two things by matching them against each other. Synonym for. Pair off against. Compare, contrast, match, face, confront, compete with. In the experiment, students will pair off against each other to test their hypotheses. The final round of the tournament will see the top two players paired off against each other in a battle for the championship title. In the final round of the tournament, the two top-seeded players will pair off against each other in a highly anticipated match for the championship title. Face off against. To compare or contrast two things, especially when they're in direct competition or conflict. Synonym for. Face off against. Compare, contrast, confront, compete with, challenge, oppose. In the negotiation, the two parties will face off against each other to reach an agreement. The two political candidates will face off against each other in a televised debate tonight. In the final round of the tournament, the reigning champions will face off against their toughest rivals. Put side by side. To compare or contrast two things by placing them next to each other for comparison. Synonym for. Put side by side. Compare, contrast, juxtapose, place together, parallel, associate. The art curator decided to put the two paintings side by side to highlight the similarities and differences in the artist's styles. The photos are put side by side to highlight the differences in landscape before and after development. Let's put the two proposals side by side to compare their key features and advantages. Check off against. To compare or contrast one thing with another by checking for differences or similarities. Synonym for. Check off against. Compare, contrast, check, assess, verify, inspect. Let's check off the items on our list against what we've already packed to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. The researcher checked off the results of the experiment against the predicted outcomes. When you check off your qualifications against the job requirements, it's clear that you meet all the necessary criteria. Align with. To compare or contrast one thing with another by examining similarities or shared characteristics. Synonym for. Align with. Compare, contrast, associate, parallel, relate, correlate. His proposal aligns closely with our company's values and long-term objectives. The company's values align with those of its target demographic. The new regulations align perfectly with our commitment to environmental sustainability. Pit against. To compare or contrast one thing with another by putting them in competition or opposition. Synonym for. Pit against. Compare, contrast, match against, face off against, compete with, challenge. The boxing match will pit the undefeated champion against the challenger for the title. The upcoming debate will pit two prominent scientists against each other to argue their opposing theories. The novel pits the protagonist against various challenges to test his character. Counterbalance against. To compare or contrast one thing with another by considering their respective strengths and weaknesses. Synonym for. Counterbalance against. weigh against, measure up, contrast with, evaluate against, balance out, gauge against. In selecting a new phone plan, it's important to counterbalance the lower monthly cost against the reduced data allowance. The advantages of the new technology need to be counterbalanced against potential risks. When evaluating job offers, she counterbalanced the higher salary against the longer commute and fewer vacation days. Fade out. To gradually become darker or less visible. Synonym 4. Fade out. Diminish, vanish, dissipate, disappear, evanesce, wane. As the sun set behind the horizon, the colors of the sky gradually faded out. The old photograph had faded out over the years, making it difficult to see the details. The lights in the room started to fade out as the power went off. Drown out. To make something less visible by surrounding it with darkness or shadow. Synonym 4. Drown out. Overwhelm, overshadow, muffle, suppress, overpower, eclipse. The loud music from the party next door drowned out our conversation. The tall trees drowned out the moonlight, casting a deep shadow over the forest. The noise of the construction site drowned out the sound of the birds chirping. Cast over. To cover something with darkness or shadow. Synonym 4. Cast over. Shadow, shade, cover, blanket, envelop, veil. The storm clouds cast a gloomy shadow over the landscape. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the fields before disappearing below the horizon. As the storm clouds gathered, they cast a dark shadow over the landscape. You can find playlists for various languages in the video description. To practice the vocabulary, you are encouraged to explore our various apps. Links to these are also included in the description. If you found something new or interesting, feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section and provide your valuable feedback. And please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more educational content.